Today, the only difference is we're graphing inequalities, which is again something that you've done now for one. Hopefully, maybe you remember what to do here. Remember the difference between equation and inequality. An equation is just the numbers on that line, and an inequality is everything either greater than or less than, which means you have to shade. Just a reminder, I hope you know this at this point, but these two, right, they do not include the points itself on the line. So this would be, when you graph it, this would be a dotted line, because we don't include the points on the line itself, because it's just everything less than or greater than. And then if it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, when you make that graph, that's going to be a solid line. I'll tell you, it's really easy to forget and make a solid line, and then remember that if you go back and see that it's dotted, your pin user is not pin, so you can always write above it and just say this is a dotted line. I'll show you what I mean by that, because I just look at it. Not as easy to make. So what does this mean? If we're going to graph these linear equations, probably it's easier if you put them in slope-intercept form, which means you have to do some algebra there. You have to be able to get y by itself. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of work to make an xy chart like that. So I gave you some steps here. Remember that you want to put it in slope-intercept form first, which means I want to get y by itself. So however you want to do that, you can move the 2y this way. I always just kind of keep the y over here. So if I want to move the x over there, I'm going to subtract x over. And I'm left with negative 2y is less than, and it's up to you. You can write 4 minus x. I've been brainwashed for slope-intercept form. I like to put my x first, so I'm going to change the order. And I'm going to say negative x plus 4. Because I like an x plus b. See how I did that? And I need to get y completely by itself, so what do I have to do? I need to divide by negative 2. I'm not going to make one big division bar, because I have to graph this. So I'm going to divide each part by negative 2. So notice over here, that's going to cancel out, and I'm going to get y by itself. What do I have to do to my inequality sign? Because I divided by a negative, so that less than is going to change to a greater than. And then I'm just going to simplify, and it's nothing wrong. If you left that as negative 1x over negative 2, I promise your slope will be the same. But I'm just going to cancel out the negatives and say that's the same, right? There's a 1 in front of that. That's the same as saying 1/2 x, or negative 1 over negative 2x. And then 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. That's a negative 2y though, right? That sign in front of 2 stays with that 2. To get rid of this negative 2, I have to divide by negative 2. I need y completely by itself, right? When we graph in slope-intercept form, you can't do the slope and the y-intercept unless y is all by itself. So there's a negative 2 in front of this, so I divide by negative 2. You can't just divide one thing by negative 2. You have to divide everything by negative 2. So if you divided by positive 2, you would still be left with a negative y there. Does that answer your question? Thomas, what's your question? Here's what's really hard about math, guys. This is stuff that we started at the beginning of this chapter. This is stuff that you did in Algebra 1 all the time. And this is stuff that everything we do is based off of this slope-intercept stuff, which is why it's so important that you understand slope-intercept form and you understand how to graph an equation in slope-intercept form. And you understand how to solve an equation by getting stuff by itself. And if you don't know how to do that, you have to be seeing me outside of class. You have to be looking up extra resources, because we can't spend the entire year on Algebra 1 stuff. We have to do Algebra 2 stuff. And I've gone so slow in here because I want you to get the basics down, because if you don't have the basics, I know the new stuff's going to be harder. But we can't do that anymore. I can't spend any more time talking about slope-intercept form inside of this class. I would be happy to teach you slope-intercept form or work with you with slope-intercept form or how to solve an equation outside of class, but you have to come and see me, and no one ever comes to see me outside of class. Or you have to be looking stuff up, because we have to do Algebra 2 stuff in here. We're like the 6th week of school already, and we haven't done very much Algebra 2 yet. So please see me outside of class. If you have no clue how I went from here to here, that's Algebra 1 stuff that we need to work on outside of class. And I would be happy to help you outside of class, before school or after school or on my prep. And we can work on this stuff. But you have to spend that extra time. And if you're not willing to spend that extra time outside of class, you're going to have a tough time in here. So please see me. I will help you. But you have to know to get y by itself to move all that stuff over. You have to know when you divide by a negative that you flip that around. Because now if we have it in this form, you have to know how to graph this. That, hey, that's my y-intercept. So I can go down here to -2, and I can do my slope of 1/2, and I can do up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. This is why slope-intercept form is so important, because look how quickly you can graph that if you have it in this form. But you gotta know how to do that. Or see me. I posted some videos today on getting it from this form, this is standard form, to this form. I posted like a 10-minute video. You can check it out. If this was an equation, we would connect it like we did on our homework yesterday and we would be done. But it's not an equation, it's an inequality. So you have to decide, is this a dotted line or is this a solid line? Because it's not included. So I'm going to say dot, 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 dot. Let's say you're a pen user, or you just have a bad eraser. You could just write out here, if you made a solid line and you messed up, you could just write down here, dotted line. And then I know that you made a dotted line and you don't have to stress about scribbles. Okay? The extra part, you have to shade, because it's everything on one side or the other of this graph. So there are some shortcuts to this, but I'm going to show you the algebra way too. But the shortcut is, what sign is this? Greater than. Which way do you think is greater than that line? You think it's above or you think it's below? Greater than is above, which means you could just shade above this line. Why does that work? Because every point up here should make this true. So if you really want to check to see what works, you can pick any point out on the line and check to see if it works. I always pick 0, 0 if I can. So if I plug 0, 0 into this, I would get 0 is greater than 0 minus 2. Is that true? It is true, which is why we can shade up here. Which means we don't talk about domain and range when we do inequalities, because we have this giant shaded area. We just talk about the shaded area of every point in this shaded area would work. Everything above that line, which is why you should make your line go up to that. Vague memories of this, maybe, sort of? So you try this. Step 1, get y by itself. something with x to something out of x. I need the x. We need y by itself. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to divide everything by 5. Because I have to do it to everything. So this cancels out. I don't have to flip my sign because I didn't divide by a negative. And I have negative 2/5 x, and 10 divided by 5, could be a fraction sometimes, but this one's not, is plus 2. Because it just wasn't in the problem. So I'm just trying to get y by itself, right? So I move the addition subtraction, which is the x, and then that multiplies, so I divide by the 5. Colton, what's your question? Well, what happened to your 2x? Why did it change from a 2x to a 1x? Okay. So this should look like slope-intercept form. We like fractions because it's slope. That's our y-intercept. So then I'm going to go up here to 2, and I'm going to say down 2 over 5, negative 2/5. Down 2 over 5, down 2 over 5. Should that be a solid line or a dotted line? Go underneath it, go over dot, 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 dot. My lines don't look good. And again, you look at this sign, that's greater than, so which way should we shade? Above. And again, if you check 0, 0, in this one it won't work. 0 is not bigger than 2, that's why we shade on this side. Isn't this a positive 10? Right? Like, you just got to make sure you keep your sign straight. The 2 is negative, but the 10 is positive. So you just really got to watch those negative signs. So that's, you did that in Algebra 1. Well, you didn't do in Algebra 1, I don't think it's absolute value of the following. That can be wrong. But you have to do an inequality with any kind of graph. You just make the graph, and then you figure out where to shade it. So absolute value, this just gives you more practice. What kind of shape is an absolute value graph? A V-shaped graph, not a U-shaped graph. So if I was doing this, I'm going to use the transformation. What does it mean if there's a minus 2 on the outside? Down 2. So instead of starting at 0, 0, it's a giant graph. It's going to start down here. I made it giant on here so that it would look bigger on here. But again, if you don't like the transformations, pick what makes your absolute value go to 0, which would be 0. And then pick a number on either side of that. So I would pick negative 1 and positive 1. And that should always give you the V shape if you don't like the transformations. Okay? Because if I plug 0 in there, I get negative 2. And I should get the same answer for both of these. If I plug 1 in there, I get 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. And the absolute value is still 1 minus 2 is negative 1. And that's because we moved it down 2, and then that same shape where we go over 1, up 1, all the way through. So like this is going to go up like this. I just looked up as I was making my line to see if it was supposed to be dotted, because I do that all the time. And I got lucky this time because since it has a solid line underneath it, that's what makes that a solid graph. Yes? But there's no like above the line and below the line because it's a V shape. So you're either going to be shading inside the V or outside the V. So let's plug in 0, 0 and see what happens. If I plug in 0, 0 in here, I get 0 is greater than or equal to 0 minus 2. Is that true? 0 is bigger than negative 2? Yes? So 0, 0 works. So I'm going to shade where 0, 0 is. Is there a rule that like one means inside and one means outside? I don't really know because I always just check the place. If there's a rule. You're either leave inside or you can shade outside. It might be as a limited one, right? Overjoyed. You try this last one. See if you can get your graph. I passed out the paper. Absolute value still a V-shaped graph. Can you figure out where it goes? Can you figure out if it's dotted or solid? Can you figure out where the shape is? Can I make the graph dotted or solid? Where do I shape? Again, I started with 0 because 0 is what makes that asymptotic equation. Right? So I end up that I moved up 3 this time, right? So at 0, it's actually up here at 4. And then I get that same V-shaped pattern. That's why I love transformations, because I just know I go up 4, I make that same shape. I almost messed up because this one's supposed to be dotted, right? And again, you can just write dotted up there if you messed up. Don't stress. And then I'm going to figure out where I shade. And again, you can pick any point you want. I just always pick 0, 0 because it's the easiest. And if 0, 0 works, I would shade where it is. If 0, 0 doesn't work, I shade on the opposite part of that graph. So does it work on this one? Is 0 less than 0 plus 3? Is 0 less than 3? So since that is true, I have to shade where 0, 0 is, which means I'm shading all of this graph. So on your homework here, I've given you a few linear graphs up through number 7 are linear graphs in color form. Check out the first 2, they're just X or Y, those are vertical, and then 8 and 9 are actually values. Practice your graph